the first chapter, and briefly highlighting some essential points. And after this, Sri Radhika Devi Dasi, who's been a homeschooling mom for several years now, and she's also a Sunday school teacher, as well as she runs a Vaishnav Academy, which is a homeschooling co-op where they teach homeschooling kids together. She will be highlighting some of the activities that one can do in order to and some activities that are in the guidebook, and she will be elaborating and showing you some samples of those. Okay, and we also have Madhumati Devi Dasi. She's a former academic director who inspired the Vrindavan Gurukul to introduce the daily study of Bhagavatam through our guidebooks. Now she's moved to Bangalore, a working mother, and she teaches Srimad Bhagavatam to her own children as well as many children online. We also have Geeta Mataji from Pune, who pioneered classes in her yatra. And then we have Brajbalabi Mataji from Surat, who also pioneered this study of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is simply to encourage all of you that this process really is very effective, and to encourage all of you to also begin the study with your own children as well as with other children. So now we will talk. We will go through chapter 1, briefly highlighting the main points, and through a PowerPoint that we have prepared. So this is the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, my whole purpose of doing this is to actually show you how a very difficult chapter such as this, which is full of philosophy, how this can be actually taught in a very interesting, fun way to our children. Okay, and this will be also, I will talk about the discussion questions mainly, and Sri Radhika Mataji and others will highlight the different activities that can be taken out from this chapter. Okay. So before we begin, so I will do the invocation. So please repeat say with me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is a very beautiful verse. When Prabhupada began translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, he wasn't sure that he would live through the translation of all the 12 cantos. So he wanted to give the first canto, and at least the first canto. So he put so much of his energy in this canto, and we see and that is reflected in the beautiful purpose in this first canto. And then he wasn't sure whether he would live through even translating the first canto. So he put so much of his ecstasies in these first 3 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. So like I mentioned, it's such a wonderful verse because it is here Vyasadeva talks about the definition of the absolute truth. He says that how his meditation on the absolute truth he said that this absolute truth is a person. And who is this person? He's the son of Devaki and Vasudeva. Now, surprisingly, he doesn't call this Krishna. Rather, he says son of Vasudeva. Why? Because many people can be named Krishna, but there's only one who is son of Vasudeva. See, he wants to make sure that everyone understands that this absolute truth is actually a person. He may be all pervading, but he has individuality. He's a person. And he's so wonderful. And he wonderfully describes this person and his characteristics. And the way he describes it, and the way we can explain it to our children is that how the president of the country, he's an individual, but his power can be felt in all the departments of the government, right? But he ultimately is a person. Same thing with anything in our life, right? There could be a powerhouse, right? But there's ultimately a person who works at the powerhouse, who makes it work, right? For example, there's a blender in our kitchen. It doesn't work on its own. There's a person who goes and turns it on. So ultimately, behind the energy, there's an energetic, and that energetic is Krishna. So in this way, we can explain by taking nice examples in the world around us, we can try to explain how Krishna is ultimately a person. It's just so amazing that when we, we think that children won't understand philosophy, but actually children love philosophy, and they actually like a nice challenge also and a nice fight. So for example, things like a challenge, where Prabhupada again and again talks about the theory of the Mayavadis and how he challenges them practically in so many purposes, right? The children love that. And they like to know about this, and they like to feel a good fight, right? So the Mayavadis, they will argue that since God is all pervading, he will lose in individuality. So the mother or father or the teacher can argue that and explain to the children that ultimately Krishna doesn't lose in individuality because everything has a source, and Krishna is a source. Without the energetic, there is no meaning to the energy. Right? And Prabhupada gives a very nice example of a recording. For example, anybody's recording. For example, Prabhupada's recording. When we play his recording, we say that Prabhupada spoke like this, spoke this in this. Obviously, it was not Prabhupada, but it was a recording. So in this way, the energy is the same as the energetic. Is one with the energetic, but it's also separate because one can manipulate the energy. One can manipulate the recording, right? And change it. So in that way, it's separate. So in that way, living entities in this world are manipulating Krishna's energy, which is meant to be used in his service to their own advantage. Okay. So in this way, we can, by examples, we can make children understand this concept, how Krishna is a person, how this verse is actually making that point here. Right? And then, of course, Vyasadeva explains Krishna in many, many different features that is represented by the mind map. Okay. So what are these other aspects of Krishna? He's cognizant. Now we can explain what cognizant means. It means he's aware of everything that's happening in our life. He's fully independent. He imparted this knowledge to Brahma within the heart, and by whom even the greatest souls are bewildered. So in this way, we can take them step by step and try to explain in very, very simple ways how Krishna exemplifies these qualities. He's the greatest intelligence. He has the greatest intelligence. Why? Because he's creating the brain of the greatest scientist or any other person. Right? So he has to be greater than that brain of the scientist. And we see that in any field of life, there's always a head of that community or head of that society, because there's somebody there with more intelligence, right? So in this way, we can explain them. Right? Now, another interesting thing I thought here is that we can explain to our children, how due to his illusory energy, how everything in the material world appears to be factual when it's actually temporary. It's not permanent. Okay, that's why we call it the illusory energy of Krishna. Right? And we can explain how the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Now, how do we explain? Prabhupada explains everything so nicely with, the examples, like the example of the rope and the snake, right? In the dark, sometimes we may think the rope is a snake and we get scared, right? But when you turn on the light and we realize, oh, it was just a rope. But Prabhupada explains how both the rope and the snake there's a reality to it. And there is a rope and there is a snake that does exist somewhere, right? So that reality is the spiritual reality, the absolute world. Okay, and material world is a reflection of that reality. And then he can put everybody in illusion. Nobody, because everybody came after Krishna. So who can understand Krishna completely? For example, a child, he cannot really know what his father's childhood was like, unless his father decides to tell him, right? So in this way, nobody can really know Krishna completely. Only Krishna can reveal himself completely. So this material world is so in this way, Krishna can put people under illusion. And then we can get into stories. We can ask them stories of occasions where Krishna put great personalities into illusion. And one of them will always come across the story of Brahma Vimohana Leela, where Krishna put him under illusion when he was thinking Krishna to be an ordinary boy, you know. And you know the whole story, how Krishna revealed that to him after Brahma was so perplexed and so much in anxiety after Krishna showed all his Vishnu forms, you know. He was so much in, and then he took pity on him, and then he revealed his form again as little Krishna. So in this way, Lord Shiva was also covered by illusion one time by the form of Mohini Murti. So many nice examples. And then we can make the contrast of how pure devotees, they don't come under this illusory potency. So Bhagavatam is taught by contrast. So for example, we see Prahlad as the greatest devotee, but then we see Hiranyakashipu as the greatest demon, right? So this way we can understand the qualities of Prahlad by putting in understanding Hiranyakashipu, you know, so by contrast, right? So in the same way, we understand how the pure devotees, then they are not covered by the illusory potency of the Lord. And so many wonderful examples. We can ask our children, what kind of examples would that be? Haridas Thakur, right, is very good example. And there are many, many examples like that, right? So then, of course, the cognizance, Krishna is cognizant, means he's aware of everything, everywhere. He's aware of all our bodies, what's going on in our mind, in our bodies. But we are limited to understanding only our own bodies. So in this way, Krishna is all-knowing, all-cognizant. Then Krishna is the cause of all causes. So in other words, everything is coming from Krishna. All creation is coming from Krishna. He's the source of creation, maintenance, and destruction. He gives his potency, he puts his potency in Brahma so he can create. He's the secondary creator. But ultimately, he's the cause. Right? So we can tell them the story of creation and how Krishna, just by breathing out the universes, all the universes come into existence. Who can do that? So in this way, we can make it very, very fascinating and interesting for our children. We can even show visuals. Just to make, the idea is that we are trying to make this point that Krishna is the absolute reality and Krishna is there's nobody more powerful and beautiful than Krishna. Okay. So this conviction, as we give our children, they are able to carry it throughout their life. And anything that they come across, they will always see it with a critical mind. Krishna is so attractive that even his incarnations are eager to see him, his form, his original form. The story in the 10th canto of Mahavishnu, who had a great desire to see Krishna, and he devised such an amazing way of how he got Krishna to come to Shvetadvipan so that he could see him. See, even his own expansions are eager to see him. And of course, so many wonderful things in the 10th canto where Krishna, leaves himself in Vrindavan and expands in Vasudev Krishna to go elsewhere in Dwarka. Right? And also, we can make comparison, like the story of Bali Maharaj. As children read that, then we can give examples of Bali Maharaj, how Krishna is so powerful. That story really gives the point of how Krishna covers everything. Everything is contained within his body. As Bali Maharaj expanded himself and he took his first step, he had covered everything within the material cosmos. And his second step covered the heavenly planets, the sky, the ground, everything. And everything was covered, and he did not know where to put his third step. So in this way, they get a sense of who the Lord is and how powerful he is. So, yeah, and of course, there's many other points like independence. Krishna is the only one who's independent. We are so dependent, on him for everything. The scientists are dependent on him. They're so dependent on the rain. When there's a hurricane or some natural disaster, everybody is helpless. Right? Everybody is helpless till Krishna decides to quieten it. There's forest fires. Everybody waits till for the rain. So nobody is independent. We are limited with our bodies. We can tell them, right? We're limited with what we can do with our body. We can't fly, but a bird can fly. So in this way, we can give them many, many examples. Ask them for examples. What about they can think of examples, and they get really excited about all this. So Krishna, he doesn't depend on anybody. He's independent. He left the gopis in the middle of the night, totally independent. He was detached. Millions of Lakshmis are serving him, but he's not attached. So in this way, we can show them, we can make them understand. And of course, there's beautiful stories of in Mahabharata, in the first canto of Duryodhan, and how Krishna, showed him his Vishwarupa, right, when he tried to harm Krishna. So the next verse talks about, now this verse is very, very, very nice as well. How Srimad Bhagavatam rejects all religious activities which are materially motivated. So why? Because the Srimad Bhagavatam gives the highest truth. So people materially motivated means it gives away all the sub-religious principles, which are, mostly very popular among other people in other religions, right? They think religion is meant for improving our economic condition and for improving our sense gratification. So but Srimad Bhagavatam kicks out all this. It rejects all this. And another point that it makes in the second verse is that it is understandable by those people who are devoid of envy, whose heart is pure, okay? And such pure souls, such as Shukadev Goswami, they are able to give this knowledge to us in a way that becomes very, very powerful. And and so the other point that the second verse talks about is how it uproots all miseries. And this is a very interesting point, and in which the children can really get involved. The reason is because when miseries come upon, the devotees don't see them as miseries. They actually see them as mercy of the Lord. And therefore, they don't feel the miseries. So examples here, you can ask them for examples. For example, in the story of Chitraketu, Lord Shiva told Parvati that her curse on Chitraketu did not act because he was not affected by it. So misery will not affect a practicing devotee. Other examples is Prahlad. After all the torture that his father went through, he was not experiencing that misery. Narad Muni, when his mother died, he just left. He saw it as an act of the Lord. Vidura, when he left home, when he was kicked out by Duryodhana and insulted by him. So in this way, we can make it interesting for them. This very point, which becomes so philosophical, the Srimad Bhagavatam uproots all miseries, can become full of examples by which the child is able to imbibe these things in his heart, in her heart. Right? Now the third verse is very, very wonderful. So in which they're asking where Sudhada Goswami is asking that we should relish Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the mature fruit of the desire tree of the Vedic literatures. So Vedas are considered the desire tree, a big desire tree. Okay, and what is this ripened fruit of the desired tree? Is Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit is so wonderful. It is sweet, very, very sweet. It is actually a fruit which has no seed and no skin. Can you imagine? It's just full of juicy pulp. Right? Why? Because Shukadev Goswami has pecked on the Srimad Bhagavatam. In other words, he's assimilated this Bhagavatam and then he's given it to us. So it becomes very, very sweet. You know, when Shukadev Goswami was speaking the Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj, you know, at the banks of the Ganga, there were so many people who were listening to him. And his own seniors and gurus were there, Narad Muni and Vyasadev. And it was like they were listening for the first time. It was so nectarian. Right? So it depends, you know, who are we hearing from? When we hear from a very pure soul, it has a greater impact. So in this way, we can explain to them and give them maybe some stories, right? From the 10th canto, from the Krishna book, you know, how when the gopis were complaining to Mother Yashoda that Krishna came to their house and stole butter, and how he broke the butter pot by making a pyramid, and how he was feeding it to the monkeys. And when the monkeys got tired of eating them, when they were full, he would say that the butter was so useless. And why did they go to Yashoda? It's because Yashoda, she could not see those pastimes. So they were thinking that Mother Yashoda cannot see these pastimes. So let me tell her these enchanting pastimes in the form of complaints. So they allowed her to see this Leela. Of course, Mother Yashoda got the full benefit. Not only did she hear, but she also saw the gopis' love for Krishna. Right? So she was witnessing it more and more. So in this way, Srimad Bhagavatam becomes very, very nectarian when we hear these pastimes. So Srimad Bhagavatam is so wonderful that we need to. It's said in one place where how just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam one can develop all the 8 symptoms of ecstasy. And just like an alcoholic, he goes to bar and he drinks, and then he faints, gets unconscious, and he drinks again. In the same way, it's recommended that we read Srimad Bhagavatam again and again until we get intoxicated. Right? Another point that's mentioned in this beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada is that the way to understand is through disciplic succession. You know? And this is very nicely visually can be done by showing a tree and then a ripe fruit on the top, and how explaining to them what is the best way of getting that ripened fruit on the top of the tree. If we were to throw a stone, the fruit will fall and smash, right? So the best way, Prabhupada explains, is to actually pass the fruit gently from person to person who's sitting on different levels of branches. Right? And that is it. And this is the parampara, the disciplic succession. And they get fascinated with this example. How this, what is the best way to understand is through parampara, through this example. So then talks about how Krishna is the reservoir of all rasas, and this rasa, that the original relationship that we have is best with Krishna because he's the reservoir of all rasas, and it can be exchanged because we are qualitatively one with the Lord. And the relationships that we exchange in this mature world only through the body that does not last and is temporary. Right? So in this way, they can get some idea the difference between our relationship with Krishna versus, material relationships. So then now I'm going to go to the last slide, which is, the sages. Now this is where the story begins, and it becomes really exciting here. Now this was all philosophy part, and here the story begins. It says, once in a holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages, headed by the sage Shonaka, assembled to perform a great 1,000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord and his devotees. So here 80,000 sages have collected together in the middle of this Naimisharanya forest, and they've been doing a sacrifice for 1,000 years. Why? They're hoping that the people of Kali Yuga will benefit from that. And they describe further on in the verses the symptoms of this age and how degraded this age is. Where people are full of quarrel and hypocrisy, and their lives are shortened due to irregular habits, their dependence on other people's mercy, so many symptoms which can be done and discussed in such a vivid way with our children. I remember children were just like fascinated, and we had them even act it out, so we can do even a play on this where they act out the different symptoms of Kali Yuga. And then in contrast, the sages, they're feeling sorry for these people of Kali Yuga, and they want to do something about it. And so they're doing this sacrifice. And when they finish the sacrifice and they're all covered with black soot, Sutta Goswami arrives at the scene. And this becomes really exciting and interesting. And then the sages understand that the result of their sacrifice is his coming, which is a very interesting point, because we understand the results of all our pious acts is the association of devotees. So when we are blessed with the association of devotees, it means we are benedicted by the Lord. So now Sutta Goswami enters the scene as we read on, and they are very eager to ask the questions. And Prabhupada elaborates on the point that not only was the speaker qualified, and in the verses they talk about the different qualities of the Sutta Goswami, why he was the most ideal speaker. Not only was he well versed in all the Vedanta, but above and beyond that, he was an ideal disciple of his guru, Shukadeva Goswami. And he was submissive and well learned, right? Both. So in this way, but the audience is also very qualified here. And in order to have an exalted conversation, one needs an exalted speaker, but one also needs an exalted audience. For example, if you were to teach a child calculus, it won't work, right? Because she's not the right audience. So here we see the sages, they are very, very good, great personalities who are asking questions that are very pertinent to Kali Yuga, to the people of Kali Yuga. So today, in companies, corporations, they say that success is not only having the right answers, but the right questions. And people who are most sought after are those who ask the right questions. So we should understand and explain to our children the point that the sages their questions are very, very beneficial. So in this way, we can go through some of these verses till the end. Okay, and so I will end over here, and then I will let Radhika Mataji now take over and explain this chapter through the guidebook. Thank you very much. And then after that, we will have some more time for questions. So I'm looking forward to those things, to questions from all of you. Radhika?
Yes. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We have 100 people in Zoom, 142 on YouTube. Really appreciate your enthusiasm. And My part here is to share my experience with taking the model that Aruddha Mataji has developed and fine-tuned and honed over the years, and then condensed into these amazing books, Srimad Bhagavatam, A Comprehensive Guide for Young Readers, and share how I have been using them. So I have experience with a couple of Sunday schools because I moved, and I've taught from the same books in 2 Sunday schools with different ages of children. And I've taught, of course, at home with my own children. So whether you're teaching your child Srimad Bhagavatam at home with 1 or 2 children, or you have a study group, or you run a Sunday school or a homeschool cooperative, the Srimad Bhagavatam Comprehensive Guide for Young Readers. These books are absolutely amazing in bringing the Bhagavatam to a level of the child and making it so fun and engaging. And it's not just for children. Honestly, I can say for myself that I have begun to understand Srimad Bhagavatam after teaching from these books, because boy, it really gets it down to, breaking the principles and the philosophy down to a felt experience, arts and crafts, and, questions that you can dive into and really understand what Prabhupada is speaking about, and what, our great acharyas, as well as, of course, Sridhar Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit are talking about. So Mataji's encouragement for all of us as parents and teachers is to read the chapter in advance before we sit down to discuss it with our children. So that includes purports, if we have the time. And, sometimes if we're busy, fine. She always says, as an adult, we have more experience. We have more life expertise to pull from anyway. So if we're not able to read the purports in advance, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. We can still discuss the Srimad Bhagavatam with our children. But the system really works well. And from my own experience, years of not finding time, and then now, that my children are older, I really take the time to read the purports and then sit down to discuss with my children. It makes a huge difference. So first we go to Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, and we read only the translations of verses, not the purports with the children. And we sit down in a circle, and we read turn by turn, or if the children are younger, we read to them. And then once we're done with the book from Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, we come to a comprehensive guide for young readers. And I'm going to show you chapter 1 from this book. But before I do that, let me show you a little video that brings it to action in my Sunday school. So you'll see me using these books in my Sunday school here in Chicago. Let me see, it's sharing sound. Okay.
We want to look at the ways that children are thinking. We want to look at the way that they're actually constructing meaning.
We ourselves make it very complicated in connecting with the Lord, but when we look in their eyes, it feels so simple and easy to achieve.
Last time we did a play based on 3 modes of material nature, how the modes affect us, our behavior in certain point in time. They were applying those principles.
Philosophical concepts are intrinsically fascinating, and children seize upon the opportunity to explore those concepts.
It's not just about teaching them the talent, it's about Krishna.
This is the Srimad Bhagavatam for young readers. It's got activities, music and song and story summaries and puppet shows, and I want them to have this imprint in the body and mind and spirit that this is so fun. I want to come to the temple every Sunday because I want to have fun in Sunday school.
Srila Prabhupada always wanted that it should be taught to the children in such a way that it's like honey and not vinegar.
The need to articulate.
Trying to go to the next slide. All right, so let's dive into the book. So when you open each chapter in Mataji's book, the first thing you find is the story summary. So this is where some amazing team members with her have been working on creating a summary that is very easy for children to read, and it's written from that perspective. And they've taken some literary license, to make it a dialogue and make it very, very interesting for children. And the great thing about this is, you can see examples here. When I'm discussing Srimad Bhagavatam in a mixed group of ages, then there are also right there coloring pages that the younger children can be working on, while the older children are actually paying attention to the story summary or reading the story summary with me. And Vrinda Kishori Mataji, who has written some of these story summaries, actually has also made audio recordings of these story summaries. So I'm going to show you, I will share the link to a blog that I maintain, which has, if you click on these links here, it'll have the audio from Vrinda Kishori and her daughter Lali on chapter 1, and then they have other summaries as well. So you can listen to this particular one.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
This is Brinda and
Lali.
Would you like to join us? We're about to go into the adventures of the Bhagavatam. Let's start. Let's open the Bhagavatam. What do we see? Krishna, he's standing in front of me. We'll put our hands together and we're going to say the magic words. Are you ready? This will help us enter the Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Now, before we begin this adventurous story, I bow down to Lord Krishna with gratitude. What does gratitude mean?
Being thankful.
It means being thankful. I wonder what we're thankful for Krishna for. Can I start there?
Yeah.
I'm thankful, Krishna, that you gave me this wonderful Srimad Bhagavatam. It makes me so happy. Whenever I feel sad, I just open up the Srimad.
So I'm going to continue with the presentation. These audios that are recorded are just so enchanting. We can go on forever, but just wanted to give you a little taste. And then, show you some pictures of how I've been using these books. And again, if you're only doing this at home, it's just as effective. So in every chapter, you'll find this nice list of key messages where the authors have, very nicely summarized the themes and categorize, these verses from the first chapter have this theme and these key messages. And again, personally, as an adult reader, I find this to be very helpful. And I know of others in St. Louis as well as in Chicago that have bought these books that don't have anything to do with children. They're just reading Bhagavatam, they're adults reading Bhagavatam, and they use these books themselves. But today we'll focus on how to use these guidebooks for children. So you'll find in the first chapter a nice description of characters that are in the first chapter. And the way I used it with my children was I would ask them, okay, what do you know about Shukadeva Goswami? And they'll say, I know this and I know this, and then what do you know about Maharaj Parikshit? And we'll discuss these character descriptions, and then if we're missing something, then we'll refer to the points that are given in the book. And again, you can see that because there are coloring opportunities right alongside, the book provides something for the young children to do, perhaps, while the older ones are actually reading directly from the book. And then the chapter provides related verses that can be memorized by children, related to the themes in the chapter. So for instance, in the first chapter, the holy name is everything, and also how to approach a spiritual master and inquire from him, the questions from the sages. So we memorize these 2 verses, and every chapter has understanding the story, multiple choice questions. So it makes it really fun for the children to understand the concepts that are presented. We do it in a fun way where everybody has A, B, and C, 3 cards. And we'll read question 1 and we'll say, okay, who's the author of Srimad Bhagavatam? And everybody hold up your card. So somebody holds up A, Shukadeva Goswami. Another kid is holding up Srila Vyasadeva, B. And then we say, okay, the answer is, and then, we know who's holding the right card. So it becomes a lot of fun. Here's a picture of one of my students. I'll move this out of the way. So here's a picture of him holding up, the understanding the story page from the book. And what I really like in these books are the higher thinking questions, because this gives me as a parent or as a teacher questions that I can ask children. Aruddha Mataji is very natural with her discussion and her tutorial method of asking questions and inquiring and going deeper that way. But for some of us that are not so natural with this, these list of questions, and every chapter has them, really give us nice questions to ask our children to go deeper into the chapter. I've assigned many of these to my own kids at home to write down, and helps them with their punctuation and grammar and writing, their handwriting. Or lately what I've been doing is I found that it's more exciting for, I teach a group of 3 students, 2 of which are mine, and 1 is another one who joins us on Zoom. So I have a Google Classroom, and if I post it on the Google Classroom, everything becomes very exciting on the computer for some reason. So, you can do that as well. And then every chapter goes into these activities, again, which bring the concepts, the theory, the philosophy to life. So in the first chapter, visiting a botanical garden, and there's a suggestion of doing a memory activity when you go to visit the botanical garden. So one person says, when Narada Muni was traveling north, he went past, and you can see what you see in the botanical garden, and forests. And then the other person adds something. When Narada Muni was traveling north, he went past and saw some forests and squirrels. So it becomes a memory game. There's also a suggestion of a scavenger hunt in the forest and the Lord in the heart. So we made a heart, just like this activity describes, which with a picture of Krishna inside it. And we took it into just a park. And one of my children hid the heart. And then my other son and myself, we tried to find it. And then in Sunday school, I converted it into a scavenger hunt, also suggested here in the book. This is a really fun activity because, the Bhagavatam, like Mataji describes, first chapter talks about illusions and how the material world is an illusion. The reality lies in the spiritual world. And these concepts that Prabhupada is explaining, such as the shadow cannot satisfy you. Only the real thing can satisfy you. This activity brings it to life, where you have a lamp and you create shadows, from that light. And then you ask the children, okay, so the shadow of the sandwich, can it satisfy you? You say, no. And you say, see, it's like that. The material world is just an illusion and it cannot satisfy because it is a shadow of reality. But all these ideas, how do you as a parent or a teacher come up with all these ideas? I mean, fortunately, it's all there in the book in one place. I used to spend hours developing curriculum before, of course, these books came about. Oh, the Bhagavatam book is a very fun way to bring the concept of how the spiritual master is the captain of the ship, and he takes us from this material world to the spiritual world. And I'll show you lots of pictures of how we did this in Sunday school. So we kept it very simple. You can make it more elaborate by having a really nice spiritual world out there. But here's Sutta Goswami made out of made out of sticks and pipe cleaners and a bubble head. And he's the captain of the ship. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the boat that is taking us from this material world to the spiritual world. And again, the concept really was brought to life. We even had a river made out of ribbon. And you can see the children really got into it. And they were able to explain the philosophical concept after class. Other ideas of drawing. So this is like a Pictionary game where, you have a quick fire. Somebody takes a whiteboard and they have 1 minute to draw one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga, because the chapter describes people in the age of Kali Yuga, they have short lives. So they start drawing. Oh, the person is alive and then the person, plop, dead. And then others have to guess within a minute, what they drew. Or people are disturbed or lazy. We did this as well. And there, you can pick and choose. Like this sacrificial fire activity, I didn't do this in my class or with my children at home. I always pick and choose from the chapter, the activities that I want to do. But this sacrificial fire is creating a little yagya out of matchsticks and decorating it. This is one activity that we loved. Mataji was explaining about how the ripened fruit of Vedic literature is not just thrown, it's passed down in disciplic succession. And Shukadeva Goswami is like the parrot, and the parrot that pecks on a mango fruit makes it even sweeter. So in the book, there are these templates, for many of the activities. So at the end of the chapter, there'll be resources. So here's resource 1, and you make a photocopy and then you cut it out. You can see pictures of children coloring. I copied the pages and then the children are coloring them, they're cutting them. And then on a piece of paper, we wrote, Shukadeva Goswami makes the Bhagavatam even sweeter. And then the parrot is on a pin, one of those split pins. So the parrot, again and again, the children were making the parrot peck the mango, so they're peck, 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 peck with the fruit, and they're understanding, oh, here's my son with too much glue on the mango. So the children can understand the concept. They're moving the parrot, and okay, so the scriptures are like the mango, and Shukadeva Goswami is the parrot, making it sweeter. So I want to leave some time for questions. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see there are activities for all different ages, young and old alike. I have taught this to, from like babies. I've used this book for babies to teenagers. So again, I'm not going to go through all activities because of our time. It's very important that we have some time for questions. There are a lot of writing activities and rhyming words, vocabulary, grammar exercises as well for us to teach English and grammar and writing from Prabhupada's books directly rather than, you know, getting other books. Here's an example of a word search that my son designed using the resource given in the book. And you learn spellings, you learn, you know, you have to look up words in a dictionary. And again, it's just beautiful to be able to teach English to our children based on the Srimad Bhagavatam. They're crosswords, and you can see the children here working on this crossword. And of course, theatrical activities. This was one of our favorites where, you know, I had all the symptoms of Kali Yuga in little chits of paper. So lazy, misguided, unlucky, always disturbed, arguing. And then one child comes forward, picks up a chit and lazy. Okay, now they have to act being lazy. So they act being lazy. And the other children have to guess, okay, which symptom of Kali Yuga is this? But you can see that from this, you know, this way of teaching, a child can really understand the Srimad Bhagavatam. It becomes very relatable for them. For younger children and older alike, lots of rhymes and poems in the book. Srimad Bhagavatam is as bright as the sun. Listen to it carefully and your hearts will be won. Deep in the forest of Naimisharanya, the sages were having a spiritual yajna, spoken to Shaunika and the sages of Krishna's pastimes throughout the ages. So the Goswami told the history of Shukadev's narration of Krishna's mysteries. Listen attentively to the stories and grow in love of Krishna's glories. Cream of the Vedas is another beautiful poem in this chapter, which basically tells the whole story in a poem form. And, you know, we would recite these poems again and again, and the child has understood the whole chapter in a beautiful poem. And very important, answers for the adult that's working with the child. So any of the exercises that, you know, have objective answers are included in the book. So in the United States, you can order these via Amazon, and I have the prices here of these books. And in India, I'm going to be sending this link in our chat box. I already sent the link for my blog. So if you look at the blog, you can kind of see, you know, I've chronicled or logged my methodology of teaching from this book. So if that helps you in any way, and it's got Vrinda Kishore's summaries, you know, attached to each chapter. So you can click on my blog and get Vrinda Kishore's summaries for musical summaries for these chapters. And in India, Canto 1 has just been released along with Homeschooling Krishna's Children. Of course, these books have been there for a while, for many years, but just, you know, the revised and updated version was released December 15th. And Canto 2 is coming in a few days, and mid-January, Canto 3. And we have a special for our Golden Age Media, which is the publisher, has a special for the first 108 orders to get all 4 books and get 10% discount with free delivery. So again, I'll send out that in the chat. And with that, I am done. So I'm going to turn it over to Madhumati Mataji.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for the lovely presentation. And Aruddha Mataji, as always, you know, with her, it's so simple, you know, the way she presents it makes everybody feel that, oh, I can do it too. Thank you so much, Mataji. So I think, you know, I really don't want to say much today because Radhika Mataji has given a good presentation, an overview of the book, and people here are really going gaga over the book, and I'm sure they're all going to quickly place their orders. So I would like Mataji to address the questions. There are quite a few questions here, Mataji. So it's better, I think, because you did want to spend some time answering the questions. So I think it's better you do that, Mataji.
Thank you, Madhumati. Thank you. This was the first one, the first class. So, it took longer, but I know that starting the next class is going to be quite straightforward. The presentation of the chapter, how we can teach it, through discussion, and then through the guidebook and questions. So it's going to be quite straightforward. Thank you, Madhumati. Thank you.
So Mataji, there are questions on mostly about the age groups, and that is it's an often asked question, right? So they wanted to know about how it's possible to, what kind of time should we devote for reading, and age group, how does it differ? These kind of questions are coming up.
Yes.
So if you could address the,
So depending on the age of the child, and the capacity to be able to study for a certain period of time, we can adjust accordingly. A younger child will not be able to sit through an hour class, but we can reduce the time to like half hour instead of an hour. But for older children between the ages, like online classes, that I've been doing, 1 hour is pretty good. I mean, it passes very quickly, and so I spend an hour for the older kids, which means right about from 8 years to all the way to 15, 16 years. The child can sit through a 1 hour class, and so one can adjust and do accordingly. Now, for little children, you can teach twice a day, little in small periods of time, rather than all in one go. And like Radhika Mataji mentioned, if you have two children and one is younger and always disturbing, then it's good to give some coloring, like she was showing, some coloring where the child can be busy with his or her hands and her energy is engaged in some good work. And this way, the younger child is listening while the mother or father teaches the older child and discusses, and it's amazing how much they pick up, because when you ask them questions, they actually can say quite a bit, and they say their realizations. So don't give up if you have a younger child who's quite a little super active. Just try to find something that can engage the child, but in a way it doesn't make noise, like soft toys or coloring, like that. Okay.
There's one Mataji asking a question of how to get the guidebooks delivered to United Arab Emirates, UAE.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that would be through Golden Media. They do deliver everywhere, Bangladesh or to the Middle East, China, everywhere. They would have to contact Nanjivan Gopal Prabhu. And you have shared that, right, Radhika? Yeah. So,
Okay. Questions about whether soft copies or e-copies of the books.
No, we don't have e-copies of the book. Because they would, these are workbooks where children write into the book. So the purpose would be lost if we had e-books. Radhika, did you want to add in that? Or?
No.
Okay.
YouTube questions coming in as well. How do you explain concepts like demigods to young children, 6 to 7 years old?
Demigods is not, they are just like assistants to the Lord, assistants to Krishna, just like we have assistants in a government or, any head of any company or any place always has certain assistants to help with the work. So these are like assistants to managing the universal affairs. So that's not a very difficult concept to explain. And there are some activities in the guidebook that elaborate the concept of demigods as you go along in the chapters. So that also helps. Okay.
We have several questions coming in because you mentioned that you do classes for children.
Oh.
about whether there's possibility for children to join your classes.
Well, I've been lately spending more and more time with these books, and so my capacity to do extra classes has been really limited now. But definitely there are many, many devotees out there, many wonderful mothers who are extending this opportunity to children worldwide. And I would definitely encourage them to, maybe in our next session, we can have them introduce themselves and see maybe if anybody wants to volunteer doing that, because we can actually train, all these wonderful mothers can actually train you, and we can also help in these classes how to actually do classes for children from all over the world. We can, depending on the time zone and everything. So we can definitely help. This is the whole purpose of these classes, is actually to come together as a group and learn the process of teaching our children and other children, and to learn from the experts. And there are many out there. Okay.
Question about getting these books in Muslim countries like Qatar. Seems like, not easy.
Yes. I mean, I know Nand Gopal Jivan Prabhu has the know-how of how to get these books everywhere. So I've talked to him before, and you would have to contact him. And he is he's been a publisher for years, and he's very expert in all that shipping process. So please talk to him.
Okay, and for everyone, I'm sending that number again, although I have sent it in YouTube as well as in Zoom. So the number that you're just receiving, that is the number of Nanda Gopal Prabhu. Question about methodology. How long should we spend on teaching one chapter?
I would say an hour, unless the chapter is exceptionally long, then we would do it in 2 sessions, which means 2 hours. The key thing to remember is that we don't want to go very slow or very fast. It has to be just right for children to actually understand, and also have some realizations towards the end of the class. So I would say on an average an hour. And we don't need to stop after every verse. We keep reading till we find, we keep taking turns to read until we find a topic that we want to discuss. If you have the time, you can look over the chapter ahead of time and note down the points, that come, the essential points that come from the purports. Because what's happening is the children are not reading purports, but you are taking, as a teacher or parent, you are taking the points that Prabhupada makes in the purport to them in the form of discussion. Not every purport, but the points that they can, you feel that it would be good for them. And every parent or teacher is different and has different, that's why curriculum on Srimad Bhagavatam is so difficult. Because there's so many topics that come from the purports, and so many subject matters, that to try to restrict it in the form of just this many activities is actually very difficult. Many times as we are creating materials, we have to limit, and that's very difficult. We get far more material than what we can publish.
And just to add to that, I have found that at home, using these guidebooks, I'm able to complete a chapter in a week. So, the first 1 or 2 days, we read Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, and then the next 3 days or so at home, we do all these activities and story, summary, and all these crafts from the Srimad Bhagavatam guidebook. And that's generally been the pace that I have found works well. And, if we're doing like in a Sunday school kind of setting, which is just an hour once a week, then I spend a total of 4 hours, so which means a month on each chapter. So then it goes slower, but at home, we're generally able to do these faster. we're going to have to bring it to a close with a couple more questions to respect everyone's time. We have a question about, can I teach Srimad Bhagavatam in my mother tongue if I'm not very comfortable with English?
Well, yes, of course. Prabhupada just about translated this beautiful literature into many, many languages, and many of the local languages in India as well. So yes, you can teach in your own mother tongue if you're more comfortable with that. Otherwise, you teach from the English translation that Prabhupada originally gave in.
Another question about methodology. Do we begin with the first canto with the kids, or what is the approach?
Well, there's some people who are quite confident about doing it from the first canto because with the help of the guidebook, because the guidebooks are here now. So now it becomes possible for parents to teach right from the beginning, because there's so much help there in terms of activities. Because if some parents, they find it very challenging because of the nature of the first canto and second canto. It's highly philosophical. But if you feel you can, you're fine with it, you just go ahead. Otherwise, another way is to do some stories before you introduce Canto 1. Just a few stories, like Dhruva story, or Gajendran, the crocodile story, or Prahlad's story. This way they get an attraction through the stories, and then when you go back to the Canto 1, then you can systematically go through all the cantos. Okay, so there's 2 ways to do it.
And perhaps this will be our last question. How to teach rhymes or poems from the guidebook. I sometimes find it difficult to make tunes to them.
Do you want to share it?
So, yeah, it's, the poems are just fun, and they don't, I don't exactly know what tune they're supposed to be set to, but I read them like a poem. The other one, the cream of the Vedas. Many great devotees came to hear Shukadev as he spoke Srimad Bhagavatam in just 7 days. So a lot of these have rhyme, and you just find a certain meter to it, and the kids seem to enjoy it, even if we don't have great skills in putting them to a proper tune.
Oh, Radhika, I want to answer one question that I just saw.
Yes.
And that was that somebody is asking about, should it be taught every day of the week? Yes. If you can do it, do it, because just doing it once a week, the effect is phenomenal. What to speak of every day of the week, like I mentioned in my introduction, that it can really mitigate the effects of materialistic education, because most of you over there are I'm assuming you're sending your children to school, right? So how to counteract those effects of materialistic education is to teach them Bhagavatam every day, if you can. Okay, that would be wonderful if you can. And it's just a matter of discipline. Once you get the children on a regular schedule and they develop an attraction, they will naturally be drawn towards that. Okay.
So Mataji, is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, I just want to, I'm really happy to, that I was able to share with all of you some of our experiences here. And I'm eagerly waiting for the next class where we will allot more question time. So the questions that you have, please keep them and don't lose them, so that next time we can address all the answers to those questions. Okay. And next time we will cover chapter 2 of Canto 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining. Until next week, Hare Krishna.